Imagine starting a game that appears to appeal to a younger, family-friendly audience, only to then find out that its sole purpose is to turn your childhood memories into your worst nightmares. That's Mascot horror games for you, as each of these games usually play on the tropes and similarities of your favorite children's shows, but adds a disturbing flair to it. So, on the 11th day of the 31 days of Halloween, we'll be taking a look at the best Mascot horror games of all time. For the purpose of today's video, we're looking at horror games that build most of the plot and story around mascot characters or heavily inspired by a children's mascot character. Also, since a lot of mascot horror games are usually split into multiple chapters or games, we'll be featuring the entire series of each entry on today's list. Before we get started though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel for more survival horror content. Also hit that like button if you enjoyed today's topic. Finally, this video is officially sponsored by G Fuel, so if you're looking for ways to support the channel, consider picking up your favorite tub of G Fuel using the link below or the code NerdSpaceGames at checkout to save up to 20% off your next order. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and this is my top 10 best mascot horror games of all time. Let's get it. Number 10, Andy's Apple Farm. As with most entries on today's list, Andy's Apple Farm starts off relatively innocent as Andy joins his friends in a few different mini games on a warm, sunny day. At first, it seems like his friends are just trying to have some fun with him, but things take a dark turn as time goes on. Eventually, the game starts to glitch out, and as it does, the game slowly starts to reveal the hidden truth behind the story and the characters involved in the game. These truths involve the fictional game and its creator and the tragedy that befell his family, including death, possession, and murder. Even the game itself reveals dark themes as Andy finds himself in a dark, horrifying reality alongside the people he called his friends. Number 9, Choo-Choo Charles. While all of the entries on today's list are mascot horror games in the sense that they are based on mascot characters of fictional companies going rogue, Choo-Choo Charles is a little different in that regard, as it's a mascot horror game that's inspired by a real-life mascot character, Thomas the Tank Engine. Only instead of the traditional tank engine, imagine if Thomas was, I don't know, an ancient spider demon train that feeds on victims and manages to catch. Yeah, that's pretty much Choo-Choo Charles in a nutshell. The gameplay is very different compared to most mascot horror games though, as this game involves traveling around and exploring an island via a train. While exploring, Charles might show up at any point in time, and if he does, the player will need to use whatever weapons they have at their disposal to fend off Charles and force him to flee or risk becoming his dinner. Number 8, Baldi's Basics in Education and Learning. As the name suggests, Baldi is a mascot of an educational game that teaches the player basic math. Essentially, the game tasks you with moving around a school and collecting notebooks. However, to claim each notebook, the player needs to solve a simple math equation. Well, as with every mascot horror game, nothing is as it seems. Not long after the game begins, Baldi and the rest of the people in the school go completely nuts as they each become a danger to you and your goal to collect every notebook. Baldi follows you around with his yardstick that continues to slam against his hand as he slowly follows you around. In fact, as he gets closer to you, the sound of him smacking the yardstick against his hand gets louder and louder. It creates a tense experience, especially when you start throwing in the jump scares of him or other people in the school catching up to you. Number 7, Indigo Park. Indigo Park, heavily inspired by Disney World obviously, is an indie mascot horror game that follows a protagonist who ends up in the abandoned and closed down theme park Indigo Park. After arriving, an AI version of Rambley the Raccoon greets the player and requests the player's help in helping him fix the park. What follows is a terrifying journey into the different attractions of the park as each of the other mascots of the game attempt to kill the protagonist. At the same time, Rambley appears to be hiding something, as well as Indigo Park appears to have a dark and unsettling past. What starts off as most kids' dream come true of having a theme park to themselves turns into your worst nightmare as the inhabitants of the park aim to make sure that this is a visit that you'll never forget anytime soon. Number 6, Tattletail. In this mascot horror game set around Christmas, a kid wakes up to sneak into their basement and open their Christmas gift a few days early. Upon doing so, they meet Tattletail, a popular children's toy heavily inspired by Furby. Tattletail requires the player to feed it, charge it, and even play games with it to keep it from making too much noise and waking up your parents. The first night starts off relatively simple enough, as it's exactly what you would expect from a toy like this, but as it gets closer to Christmas, Tattletail begins to get more and more disturbing as it appears to have a mind of its own. On top of that, other Tattletail characters begin to appear as well, most notably Mama Tattletail. This is the dangerous one, as Mama will punish the child for playing late at night as she manages to catch them. The game gets more and more intense until everything just goes absolutely nuts on Christmas Eve. As someone that was always creeped out by Furbies, yeah, Tattletail is the stuff of nightmares for sure, at least for me personally. Number 5, Amanda the Adventurer. As I'm sure you can tell by the play on the name of the game, Amanda the Adventurer is a dark parody of Dora the Explorer. Amanda the Adventurer is a fictional kids TV show in which the main character of the show, Amanda, will interact with the viewers by asking them to answer questions or complete activities with them. However, over time, Amanda's personality will begin to change as she would start questioning different issues and events within her own life as well as her purpose. This change in her personality will also lead to her doing and saying extremely disturbing things to the point where her best friend, Wooly, begins to question Amanda and even argue against some of her actions and decisions. On top of that, in the world outside of the show, other disturbing situations will come up as a monster will begin to torment the player, which seems to be connected to Amanda the Adventurer, the show. Number 4, Poppy's Playtime. Based on real-life toy companies, most notably Ideal Toy Company, Poppy's Playtime is a mascot horror game that mostly takes place inside of Playtime Co.'s main facility, in which the toys inside of this facility have come to life and have become living nightmares. Huggy Wuggy might very well be the most terrifying, as it's a massive blue teddy bear-like toy that starts off by stalking you from a distance before eventually approaching you in one of the most intense moments in mascot horror games. What makes Huggy so terrifying is his monstrous teeth as he slowly walks towards the player, looking to end them the moment he gets his hands on them. However, Huggy isn't the only monster toy in this game. In fact, in the 4 chapters that are currently available right now, there are actually a ton of monstrous toys, each adding something different in terms of the scare factor. Number 3, Bendy. We couldn't talk about the best mascot horror games without mentioning the one that is heavily inspired by old school Mickey Mouse, now could we? With the 3rd game releasing recently, the Bendy series has never been more popular than it is now. Sure, it doesn't hit the same scare factor as some games on today's list, but the unique animation style and gameplay mechanics allow Bendy to stand out more than the rest of the entries on today's list. The first 2 mainline games, as I haven't played the 3rd game yet, centers around the animation studio responsible for creating a bunch of cartoons that closely resemble 1920s Disney. Obviously, you have Bendy, Alice Angel, and of course, Boris the Wolf. Throughout the games, we come across terrifying recreations of these iconic characters in the form of ink creatures that were created by using employees as test subjects and a giant ink machine that turned them into the cartoon characters of Joey Drew Studios. From a terrifying stalker enemy in Bendy to whimsical side characters, Bendy and the Ink Machine is still to this day one of my favorite games visually speaking. I actually really love the style of Bendy and the Ink Machine and the rest of the series, as I highly recommend it to fans of mascot horror games for sure. Number 2, My Friendly Neighborhood. This mascot horror game might be the one that feels the least like a horror game, but at the same time, it has the most survival horror gameplay mechanics. In fact, it's these mechanics that really elevate My Friendly Neighborhood to the number 2 spot, despite only having a single game to represent them on today's list. Taking heavy inspiration from Sesame Street, My Friendly Neighborhood centers around a filming studio in which the show of the same name is filmed at. However, after the show went off the air, the puppets and everything else in the studio was left to rot away. After arriving to the studio, you immediately realize that the puppets are alive and they each have a mind of their own with problems of their own. Your job is to help them in whatever way you can while also solving different issues at the studio so that you can make it to the top of the tower and shut off the show for good. Well, if you choose to do so, that is. As I said earlier, what really makes My Friendly Neighborhood stand out from every other mascot horror game on this list is the focus on survival horror mechanics and gameplay. In this game, you have limited resources, inventory management, puzzles to solve, and everything else you would expect from your typical survival horror game. So if we're just looking at gameplay alone, My Friendly Neighborhood is number 1 in my opinion, but if we're looking at the entire package, including the scare factor, which My Friendly Neighborhood definitely lacks, then one other iconic mascot horror franchise stands out more for the number 1 spot. And I'm sure you can guess what franchise that is. Number 1, Five Nights at Freddy's. I mean, could there really be any other answer for the best and easily the most iconic mascot horror game of all time than Five Nights at Freddy's? Hell, this is the franchise that really made this subgenre so popular. Five Nights at Freddy's is a horror franchise built mostly around animatronics at a pizza restaurant. I say mostly because the franchise kinda goes all over the place after the first few games, as we see the series explore a bedroom, sister locations, and other settings outside of the infamous restaurant. However, for the most part, Freddy Fazbear and the rest of the animatronics are usually front and center in some way, as these terrifying robots, which house the souls of children murdered by the infamous fictional serial killer William Afton, torment the player. Clearly, the inspiration for this mascot horror game comes from Chuck E. Cheese, which back in the day blew children away with their animatronic rock band, arcades, and of course, pizza. I would argue that Five Nights at Freddy's is easily the scariest franchise on this list, especially when taking into consideration the jump scares. I mean, man, those jump scares are insane. Also, Five Nights at Freddy's is without a doubt the most lore heavy of all the entries on today's list. So to recap, Five Nights is the scariest, the most lore heavy franchise, the most iconic series, and it's these games that really put mascot horror on the map. Yeah, with all of that in mind, of course, Five Nights at Freddy's deserves the #1 spot. But that does it for this episode of Nerdspace Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Is Five Nights at Freddy's the best mascot horror game of all time, or is there a different game that deserves that title? Let me know down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerdspace Games. Take care.